So for the artist Chan Horvitz, this is language. One might wonder if these characters have a direct correlation with a known alphabet, but they are not actual letters, but a typography to develop a lexicon that she considered part of her visual language. The language series is a set of drawings on paper created by Horvitz in 1964 at the height of American minimalism, where self-imposed systems generated forms and figurative representation is eliminated in favor of geometric abstraction. Horvitz designed a system methodology that generated 64 combinations of black blocks on orange grid fields, including Language 1, which is comprised of 21 drawings adhered onto one large background with an adjacent miniature. Set aside for 40 years, the language series is shown for the first time in 2005 at Solway Jones Gallery in Los Angeles. Over the course of the next 6 years, the language series moved from these flat paper iterations to three-dimensional versions like this one in 2011 that exemplify Horvitz's power in bringing minimalism to task, rubbing up against the very system that was historically ingrained in it. Here, the typography becomes an ideograph, a symbol for the greater implications that language inhabits beyond text, especially engagement and perception. In Horvitz's work, language is in a sense a silent language that does not say anything specifically. It is in this non-specificity where language is read as objects, and viewers help rewrite the definitions of the work by moving the metaphorical language around. Perhaps we take something like this for granted now because we're more familiar with participatory art than audiences were in 1964 when Horvitz first created the language series. For example, if we know that the minimalist tropes are the do-not-touch art world of the likes of Tony Smith, rooted in geometric abstraction, such as Anne Truitt's non-figurative works, or Agnes Martin's minimalist grid structure, then yes, Horvitz's work does look like minimalism as we know it. She's most frequently compared to Sol LeWitt, who once said, "The idea becomes a machine that makes the art." But it's dangerous to equate art with machines, because this negates the human connections that inevitably arise. Horvitz complicates minimalist tropes because she allowed people to change her work, creating for them a sense of ownership, departing from the mere visual toward touch. Through careful research and analysis, it became apparent to me that although Horvitz focuses on a minimalist visual aesthetic that speaks in a structuralist language system, she takes it further by creating objects that engage in relational aesthetics. As Nicolas Bourriaud acknowledges in his book, Relational Aesthetics, with this kind of work, we must judge artworks on the basis of the interhuman relations which they represent, produce, or prompt. Foregrounding the usual legibility of this kind of work, Horvitz incorporated a continuous temporality to each later iteration, contesting art's public function both practically and intrinsically. After language was shown in 2005, Horvitz installs this mural in 2011 at a Nanten Zoo gallery in Berlin. The mural is painted on the wall itself. The black rectangles are 2-inch deep canvas reliefs attached to the grid, bringing them a tiny bit closer to the viewer. No longer a succession of characters to simply read like the first works on paper, the single language character is now life-size and something to face. As critic Serge Daney says, all form is a face looking at us. Although formal, the domestic-like setting of the gallery adds to the personal relationship that visitors can have with this work. Natural light pours in from the bay window overlooking green treetops. The rectangles on the wall echo The window panes echo the rectangles of the mural, and visitors can voyeuristically gaze across the way at the neighbors' windows and then turn to language, the eye sinking into the inky surface. The mural is integrated into the space, It creates a paradoxical relationship between itself, the site, and the viewer, and it can only function in this triad relationship. Once it's deinstalled, all relationships are halted. This installation is a bridge in Horvitz practice between the 2D and 3D works, and is a foreshadowing of what happens in another iteration of the language series installed at Y8 in Hamburg. The installation is called Displacement and was part of a year-long programming series called Relocating the Self. Y8 is a yoga studio in addition to a gallery space. Here, the function of art comes to bear, and its use value shifts from an autonomous object of admiration to an object of facilitation. The press release for the exhibition explained that Y8 is interested in disputing the separation between art and everyday life, and to disassociate from classical art representation. Throughout the course of the exhibition, the 8 blocks create a dynamic relationship between the body's continuously constituted own positions. Rather than put aside, the blocks remain intermingled with those participating in meditation, balancing poses, and exercises. In general, as with abstraction in general, there are no figurative representations in this work. Instead, there is an in-between space where the system resides and is activated by the people utilizing it. Burio explains, it is in the human flow of visitors which thus becomes the raw material and subject of the piece. In 2013, Orange Grid is installed at Francois Ghebeli Gallery in Los Angeles. Visitors descend a staircase to enter the life-size installation, appointed with blocks available for them to move around and to engage with the tactile language rendition. But unlike the Y8 installation, Orange Grid is not a multi-use space, so the ability to move the blocks around falls back into the formal gallery paradigm with rules for behaving a certain way. When Michael Fried wrote in his 1967 essay, Art and Objecthood, that minimalist works confront the beholder, they must be placed not just in his space, but in his way, he's referring to artwork as a confrontational object within the rules of the gallery, rules that historically deny interaction. This denial forces the viewer to always be separated from the work, to simply be admirers of it from a distance. Statements like Fried's have caused minimalism to be relegated to the do-not-touch world. This is the history that we learned and we still buy into. What is exceptional with Horvitz is that she is disrupting both the rules of the gallery and the rules of minimalism. If Fried proposes that art must be in the way of the viewer, then these black blocks are theoretically a hindrance. But I say that hindrance is also a part of Horvitz's language. Like the pliability of language, hindrance creates options and choices that facilitate flexibility, a freedom that complicates the compositions of movement. Horvitz explained this conundrum. Freedom allowed is the intrinsic part of the concept, she said, adding that giving a person total freedom is the expression of the composition. Horvitz wasn't relinquishing her authorship of the work, but was also allowing others to make it their own. For visitors to the 3D iterations, the thrill of doing something that is not normally allowed in a gallery satisfies the desire to partake in an artwork. The rarity of such an occasion creates a strong sense of community, enhancing the artwork's social capital. Art, as Burio recognizes, is made of the same material as social exchange. It has a special place in the collective process. If language not only affects meaning, but also defines and signifies things, then it can be said that language is a constitution of things, a constitution for a way of working. Language is a chemistry through which mixing and matching letters, words, and sentences creates an alchemy that imbues meaning on the objects and things in the world. In Horvitz's language, as with reading text, a differentiation occurs between that which is seen and that which is achieved. The perception of the work depends on the participants' recognition of their own complicity. art must be brought close to touch, and touch brings perception closer.